The next on your agenda will be our Addressing Stigma panel. And our moderator for that panel is Judge Paul G. Summers. General Judge Summers serves as the Director of Corporate and Government Relations at the Jason Foundation, Incorporated, a national nonprofit foundation dedicated to the education and prevention of youth suicide. He was commissioned as a senior judge by the Tennessee Supreme Court in 2013 and has served as the State Attorney General, Judge of the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals, and District Attorney General for a multi-county district here in Tennessee. Additionally, he was partner in the Nashville office of Waller, Lansden, Dortch, and Davis. Judge Summers serves as a JAG officer for more than 3 decades in both active and reserve duty with the Air Force, Army, and National Guard. His last duty assignment was Command Staff Chief Judge Advocate with the Tennessee Army National Guard. He retired with the rank of Colonel, so Judge General and Colonel to the U.S. Army Retired Reserve in 2005. Upon his retirement after 33 years as a commissioned military service officer, Governor Phil Bredesen awarded Judge Summers the National Guard Distinguished Service Medal. Judge Summers also was awarded the Legion of Merit by the Department of Defense. He is a member of the Regional Judicial Opioid Initiative and the Tennessee Judicial Opioid Initiative. Judge Summers.
Thank you very much. Our panel will be entitled Dissolving the Stigma, and I would like to invite our panel members, Director David Rausch, Judge Sloane is here, Survivor Jan Clift, Clarke Flett, President of the Jason Foundation, and Dr. Stephen Lloyd. They are our panelists, and I haven't spoken. And I want to say hi. As the moderator, I'm the timekeeper, but I have a more important person, Kelsey Platt, who is our real timekeeper. I want my panelists to make sure they understand that when you see 5 minutes, that means you've got 5 minutes left. And when you see 1 minute, it means that you've got 1 minute left. And I don't mind, as a former judge, I don't mind telling you I'm putting my orders down. They told me that in order to be a moderator, I've got to be a good timekeeper. We're already about 25 minutes behind, so I'm going to say this is not 9:25, it's 9 o'clock this morning. At any rate, our panel is going to be discussing the issues regarding suicide and addiction. Each panelist will be asked about how they or their family have responded to the addiction crisis and also been impacted by the drug addiction or suicide, and how they have responded to drug addiction or suicide, because we all know that there is a proximate cause between suicide and addiction or vice versa. We also know that you will be given a lot of statistics today. I'm not going to bore you with any other statistics other than the ones that I have cultivated over the last 45 years as a lawyer who graduated across the street 45 years ago this December. And that is, I've had the great opportunity to argue cases, both jury and non-jury, trial and appellate, in every level of the court in the state of Tennessee, and also every level of the federal court involving and also including the United States Supreme Court. And I understand the criminal justice system, and I also understand very well that there are 3 types of issues that involve someone and addiction, which includes alcohol, which includes legal and illegal drugs. But when we talk about addiction, we have 3 types of influences regarding addiction in the criminal justice, primarily the criminal justice process. That is drug-defined, drug-related, and drug lifestyle-oriented. And if you sum up those 3 categories of issues involving addiction, I have estimated as a judge, as a prosecutor, as a criminal defense lawyer, that 75 to 80% of every criminal case that we see in the criminal justice system fall into one of those three categories. I see some nodding of heads. I've seen my Chief Justice Bivens. I've seen Judge Brock, and I've seen Judge Easter. I'm going to take that privilege, since I'm one of your colleagues, to say I think that they would all agree with that percentage, may even be more. It may even be more. I'm going to introduce all of our 5 panelists. I want to save your applause until I end. At that time, we will then ask each one of them to give their presentation about their specific expertise. Our first panelist in this order will be Director David Rausch, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, also known as the TBI. David Rausch, he serves as the director of the TBI. He was appointed by the governor last year. For 4 years, he served in the military police and the Army. God bless you and thank you for your service. For 25 years, he served in the Knoxville Police Department, also on the SWAT team, and for the last 7 years, he was chief of police here in Knoxville. We appreciate your service. We appreciate your being in law enforcement, and thank you for being director. Our next panelist is Judge Sloane. Dwayne Sloane is my dear friend. He is the circuit court judge in the 4-county district up in East Tennessee, the 4th Judicial District. He is from Jefferson County. He chairs the organizations called TJOY, the Tennessee Joint Opioid Initiative. He also chairs the 8-state regional Joint Opioid Initiative. He is a former drug trafficking prosecutor, and he co-founded his Judicial District's Drug Recovery Court 10 years ago. My new friend, Jan Clift, is truly a survivor, and she is truly a person of grace. She survived a drug-related shooting. A man shot Ms. Clift, her co-worker, the pharmacist, and a customer while stealing prescription drugs from down-home pharmacy. After battling post-traumatic stress syndrome, Ms. Clift embarked on a mission to speak out for both drug-related shooting victims and the addicts that felt pushed to the point of murder. She began her speaking tour in Granger County in the 4th Judicial District. For victims and addicts, she forgave her shooter. And hopes others will help addicts before they reach the same point. In March of 1999, I found a turning point in my life at Legislative Plaza. I was the 25th Attorney General of Tennessee. I was introduced to Mr. Clarke Flett, who sits right to my right. He has become a dear friend. At that time, Mr. Flatt told me about his embryonic nonprofit organization called the Jason Foundation, Incorporated, also known as JFI. He created or founded the Jason Foundation along with our Vice President, Michelle Ray, who's sitting in the audience. He founded it in 1997 after the tragic death of his 16-year-old son, Jason, due to suicide. Clarke told me that he had 3 options. Option number 1, do the same thing that Jason did. Number 2, become a drunk or a drug addict. Or number 3, try to train other parents about how to prevent such a disaster for their families and for others. He chose option number 3. What started in his insurance copy room as a nonprofit to educate people in Tennessee, the Jason Foundation now has 126 offices around the United States. We train and prevent youth suicide, which is the second leading manner of death in America. We train millions of people a year. For example, last year, the Jason Foundation trained almost 250,000 teachers in a 2-hour program regarding suicide prevention and suicidal ideation. Clarke Flett. Dr. Stephen Loyd, medical director, also who will be a presenter at the next panel. He's medical director of JourneyPure of the River, which is an addiction treatment facility located in Murfreesboro. He has served as the chief of medicine at the Mountain Home VA Medical Center in Johnson City. He is the assistant commissioner of substance abuse services for the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. For the last 8 years, he has focused on addiction medicine with an interest in the opioid-dependent pregnant patient. He will tell you about his life and his journey when he speaks in just a minute. At this time, I would ask each panelist to think about their particular expertise, their particular involvement regarding this issue, and I would ask each panelist about how they or their family has been impacted by drug addiction or suicide and what they or their family have done in response to that experience. As again, each panelist will have 5 minutes. After that, we will follow by 15 minutes to 20 minutes of questions and answers from the audience, so be getting your questions ready. At this time, I would like to call on this entire group to give our panelists a round of applause. Director David Rausch.
Thank you, Judge. So let me quickly, obviously, over 30 years in law enforcement, my engagement and involvement in this issue has been deep and wide. Working from the streets as a beat officer, seeing the impact on the community here in Knoxville specifically, and seeing the tragedies that result. Obviously, I've made thousands of arrests dealing with those individuals who have sold the drug, those who have illegally possessed drugs, and so that kind of has been a picture that I have seen very clearly. I've also seen the families torn apart by this horrible disease that we see. That's the perspective from law enforcement. The personal perspective is even deeper. So it starts probably back in Louisville, Kentucky, where I was born and raised in the 7th grade. First exposure was I had a great friend who used marijuana. And so he was a great kid, ran a paper route. I used to help him on his paper route. And but one day I got a call that he was no longer with us. He killed himself. He was in a paranoid state, put a shotgun to his mouth and pulled the trigger. First impact. And so life goes on. So we get in, go along life, and so then, seeing what I saw in law enforcement, it drove me to really, to try to make an impact in families and especially the youth. Then it strikes your family, right? That's the toughest part. So I have a brother who's no longer with us. He wasn't a drug issue, but it was a mental health issue, and that was a long time ago. Well, it seems like a long time now, but I was a lieutenant in the police department and got that phone call that my brother had hung himself. Yeah. So moving through that, a couple years later, my sister-in-law, battling with mental illness, shoots herself and kills herself. So these things just pile up, and you think, what can I do? How can I impact? Then it strikes you at home, right? You start the addiction issue hits you. I've got a family members. I got nieces and nephews who are addicts. A stepson who's an addict. My daughter was an addict. And so all of that hits you as you go through it. You try to figure out what can you do. And it's tough trying to find the answers. And the best thing you can do is love them. That's all you got. I've been a victim of crime. I've suffered what many families have suffered. I've been to pawn shops to recover items that were taken from me. It's hard not to have that exposure and not be impacted. I can tell you, I have a disdain for pawn shops. I think they take advantage, quite frankly, of people. And so, those kind of things impact you and they carry you as you go along. Most recently, I got the 1 minute warning, so I need to hurry so the judge doesn't gavel me. So most recently, my stepson became a father. The mother is an addict. I spent, this was 3 years ago. I spent, almost 3 weeks at Children's Hospital, God bless them, with the baby in the NICU because she was exposed, NAS. Spent a year going to medical appointments and seeing these children that have been so devastated by this disease and the families ripped apart. I'm part of the grandparent generation is what I call it, of us raising these children. We have her. She's our child full-time. She's a healthy, amazing 3-year-old now. We just celebrated her 3rd birthday Monday, and she's doing great.
Thank you, Director. Judge Dwayne Slone.
Well, thank you too, Director Rausch. I've heard parts of your story before. Thank you for your courage. During my bio and some of the introductions, you heard about me being a drug trafficking prosecutor in the early 90s, in the height of the war on drugs. And as I know Tommy Farmer, Director Rausch would agree with me, you realize doing that work early on, you can't win the war on drugs on the supply side. You have to win it on the demand side. Never been a more important time in our nation's history to fight this war on the supply side because of the lethal drugs that Tommy spoke to us about. But what you didn't hear was in my own family, I have a great-grandfather that was shot and killed by the revenuers in southeastern Kentucky for moonshining. My father was raised by, and his sister and her husband spent 3 years in the federal penitentiary for moonshining. Fortunately, 2 of the sisters caught a bus to Tennessee. They heard there were jobs, turned out to be the Manhattan Projects, and my family was able to get here. But I also have a brother, so my family filled on both sides, mother and father, with alcoholism. My younger brother has a very severe mental illness, and he self-medicated for a while, and it mostly started when I was away at law school. And so I've been his conservator for the last 26 years. In 1998, when I took the bench, I wanted to do something different. And I tried, and eventually I learned about these really great things called drug recovery course. Had this fantastic training about what addiction is and what it's not, what treatment looks like, what recovery looks like. We did that in 2009. In 2011, I thought I really understood addiction. And my wife and I got a telephone call June 17th, 2011, from maternal grandparents that were had a 6-month-old baby boy. Their grandchild, raising 2 of their grandchildren already. Their child was polysubstance abuser, mainly opioids, was prescribed the day this child was born. He spent his first 52 days in the NICU withdrawing and asked if we'd adopt him. And Joseph soon came to live with us, and of course we adopted him. But after watching his struggles, and like Director Rausch talked about, it was then and there I knew I really didn't understand addiction, because I didn't know what was so powerful that a mother with the most precious gift of life inside of her could continue to use in spite of that pregnancy, and in light of that. And so I committed myself to take a deep dive in, to do everything I could to understand addiction, particularly opioid use disorder, and do everything I could to try to prevent NAS and help people suffering. And it really wasn't until only 3 years ago when I met my good friend that you'll hear from, Dr. Stephen Lloyd, that I finally understood it was the power of the cravings, 10 times more powerful for our cravings for food when we're hungry and water when we're thirsty, coupled with the lack of judgment and insight that you have when you are in active addiction. And that for my child's birth mother, it was a matter of survival. She didn't wake up as a young child wanting to be an addict one day. She came from an upper middle class family here in Knoxville. And when she was 13 years old, she was raped by a neighbor who was in college. So since that time, my incredible team I get to work with, we've done things like supply housing to give priority to addicted pregnant women. Had the privilege of serving as the chairman of the Tennessee Judicial Opioid Initiative, the 8-state regional Appalachian Midwestern Regional Opioid Initiative. And we've developed something that's really cool that I'm going to get to talk to you hopefully tomorrow about, and it's called the Recovery-Oriented Compliance Strategy, that where it's a system, a very simple system, that the justice system can reach every person that's justice involved in this state. Thank you.
Judge Dwayne Sloane. A true person of grace, survivor Jan Clift.
On May 23rd at 11:15, working. Those are the shoes I had on that day. And they're covered in blood, and that blood will never come off. When he came in, he had a mask on, covered in black, but I knew who he was. He was a frequent visitor. He was one of those that you recognized their body type, their build. When he had us put our hands up, and I remember standing there, and I was shaking. I felt like I thought the building was shaking. I was so afraid. And I heard somebody say, "Don't be afraid." Just as plain as I'm speaking now, and I heard that. And I wanted to ask him, did you hear that? I heard somebody say, "Don't be afraid." But I was too afraid to say anything. And then he put us on our knees, and he lined us up. And when I got on my knees, I was shaking. I just stopped, and I was praying, "Lord, if it's my time, and if you find me faithful, please take me home with you. But if not, tell me what I need to do." And I heard a pop. I didn't know what it was. I thought he had ran out maybe and knocked over something. But then I heard the second pop. And Steve fell. After that, all I remember was motions. Just when I come to myself, he threw me off his back apparently, and I ended up next to a cabinet, and I thought, "Oh, I'm sweating." Realized, and I looked down, and my hair was red, and everything I had was red, and how am I going to let somebody know who this is? Because I'm dying, and I have to let them know. After that, after surviving and going through that, we can't let people go without help. Because I tell my story because I didn't know if I had a purpose. What was my purpose? I prayed, Lord, tell me why I survived and those two men didn't survive. Why? I felt so guilty. And I realize everybody I tell that story to, because I want them to know that there is a God and He is alive, and that's why I'm here. And they'll say, you know, my brother needs help, and I don't know where to go, or I don't know what to do, or my aunt. It doesn't, and I tend to tell it everywhere I go because I think that's why God left me. And I find out that they're everywhere I've been and everywhere I've went. It's amazing. In the grocery store or doctor's office with my mother or wherever I go, people are, you have no idea how many people are, I guess you all do, but in Granger County, my son, my oldest son, he been in the business I was in, I didn't realize, but he was an addict. But thank God, he graduated college and he got help. He gets up every morning, and just like you would take your pill for blood pressure, he takes his pill. We have to help. We have to be able to do something. If we don't, it's only going to get worse. And I forgave that guy. Yes, I did forgive Jason, because if my Bible and my God tells me if I don't forgive, I'm not forgiven. And my heart's free of that. So I thank God, I pray every day, just let my purpose, if this is my purpose, thanks to Judge Sloane. The other day when my mother, and I need to tell this to about suicide, my son's little girlfriend was 15 years old. Her mother was an addict. Her father thought if he kept her in the house, he didn't know, nobody understood quite at that time, if he kept her there, that she could, sophomore in high school, and they come and told her she committed suicide. There is a way, and it's out there, and we can do it. If we stick together, we have to do this. If there's any way, and Monty, he stole all my lines today, so I'll let him. But it's true. If you're out there, hire him. My son can't get a job if he's a college graduate, but please, that's my goal, is to hopefully be able to get a doctor and get a clinic in Granger County and all the counties that, I've took people to the doctor and I've took them to pharmacies. And the biggest stigma is with pharmacies and the medical community. When you go into a pharmacy with somebody to try to help them get their medication, if you want to be looked at like and treated like a dog, that's one of the best places to go. I can say that because I was in that business. They treat people horrible. The saddest things. The place I worked at, 6 months later, my son could not get a prescription filled there. Down-home pharmacy wouldn't fill it, and they didn't give him a reason. Asheville Highway, CVS, threatened to call the police, and Walgreens on Asheville Highway. So please, if somebody comes in, you know what? Listen to them. They need you. They need help. Be there. That's the only way we're going to stop it, if we care. And if you don't care, let's get out of that business then. But please, let's help them. That's why we're here. That's why God says we're here.
Thank you. Jan Clift, survivor. Next is Clarke Flett, president of the Jason Foundation, Incorporated.
For those that can't see on my left, I'm the only one up here with notes. and that was because of Judge Summers. Judge Summers works in our office, and when he was talking to me about doing this presentation, he knows that when I get in front of a bunch of passionate people, I can become passionate and sometimes disregard placards that say 5 minutes and 1 minute. So he suggested I do an outline, thinking that all people would be doing an outline. I'm the only one with an outline up here. So, but I will go with that one. July the 16th, 1997. If you were counting days, that would be 8,051 days ago. It was a day that changed my life, changed my family's life, and a lot of our family friends' life. It was a loss of a child. My youngest son, Jason, who was age 16 at the time, was lost to what we call a silent epidemic. Today, that silent epidemic is the second leading cause of death for our young people, ages 10 to 24, across our nation. It's a silent epidemic that it knows no racial, religious, social, or economic barrier. It doesn't know whether you're from the big city or the rural town. It's a silent epidemic that now claims over 130 young lives each and every week. Think about that. 130 lives each and every week. White, black, Latino, Asian, New York, Los Angeles, Florida, Tennessee. 130 young people each and every week lost to this silent epidemic. Of course, this silent epidemic is suicide. I've been referring to in my first comments about 10 to 24, but it's actually even a greater in scope than that. When we go to 24 to 45-year-olds, so we can really basically go from 10 to 45-year-olds. Suicide in our nation now is the second leading cause of death across the board. More than heart disease, almost double the amount of homicides we have in our nation. And there's 16 times more deaths in suicides than for HIV deaths. As dramatic and as impactful as suicide is in our nation today, I regret to have to tell you that we're not winning the battle. The rates are increasing. We get the information on a daily basis of reports of how we're not winning the ground. We're not making the ground. Even though we have more resources, more counselors, more awareness than we've ever had, we're not winning this fight at this time. That's not saying we're not going to win, but we're catching up right now. The CDC in SAMHSA, though, has done something that really changed my life. They listed it and have for years that suicide is a leading cause of death for our young people and young adults. But then in the very next sentence, they say it's also a leading cause of preventable death. And that's the key word, preventable. I was asked to say, how's this affected our family? My family and a small group of friends started the Jason Foundation in October of 1997 with the hope of someday affecting all of Tennessee. And we've been blessed beyond that. Our goal was to provide the information, tools, and resources to help people be better able to identify someone who is struggling with thoughts of suicide and then know not to be a counselor themselves, but know how to access those resources, how to get help to that person. See, 4 out of 5 young people demonstrate clear warning signs before they attempt suicide. So that was our goal. But I want to fast forward because I've got 1 minute left. Judge, you didn't tell me to break this down a little better. Why am I at an opioid? But a little over a year ago, Judge Sloane asked me to look at how opioids, how drug abuse would interrelate with what we were doing. And at that time, I didn't think there was much of a correlation of it. But since that date, we've seen my eyes have been opened. The things that many times cause the opioid use disorders are the same things that get into suicide. The chronic pain, the treating the pain, the depression, the anxiety, if you think about it, the same thing we use those opioids for are the same things that many times are the leading things into suicidal ideation. People with OUDs are 16 times more likely to commit suicide than those of the regular population. In 2072, there were 72,000 overdose deaths, up from 42,000. A report just came from the National Institute on Drug Abuse that 20 to 30% of those were actual suicides. That means out of those 72,000, 14 to 21,000 of those were actually suicides rather than accidental drug overdoses. I end up by saying suicide is a growing epidemic we have to become more aggressive on. The opioid crisis is something we have to become more aggressive on, but we have to include them both if we're going to be successful on facing this opioid crisis or facing this crisis we have in mental health with suicide. We have to work together on both of those, and that's why I'm here today, to hope that you will help us and we will help you. Thank you.
Thank you. Clarke Flett, President of the Jason Foundation. Next, Dr. Stephen Lloyd, Medical Director, JourneyPure at the River.
Thanks, Judge. Good morning, everybody. I texted Judge Sloane this morning and told him I was nervous. I've done a bunch of these over the last decade, and I'm hardly ever nervous, but I'm nervous today, and I'm starting to see the reasons why, actually. One was being back on the campus of UT. I love UT. When I got my class ring back in the day, they said, "What color stone you want in it?" I thought it was a trick question. I mean, what color stone would you get in a UT class ring? It's orange, right? And Dr. Brian Nolan was going to be here. I saw his name on the list, and so my medical school at East Tennessee State, those two things, and then I had no idea that Miss Clift was going to be here. No clue. And so that's what I want to tell you about me, because I think out of everybody up here, I'm the only one that has opioid addiction. I lived through this. I have a little band on my arm here that Karen, my wife, got me on July the 8th this year. It says 15 on it. I just passed 15 years. And my son says I'm millennial papaw. He gets on me for the way I dress with all my stuff. But I was thinking about how my life has been impacted by this, and it's the single greatest thing that ever happened to me. Without drug addiction, I would have never got to address my childhood trauma, which we're going to talk about here in just a little while, things I don't think I spoke much publicly about, but I'm going to today. And I never would have. I look over to my right, I see my son over here today, and he's sitting there. He's got a tie on. I didn't know he owned one, and he didn't think I owned one either. So I guess in his defense, I look at how his life has been impacted because I had somebody reach out and help me 15 years ago, and they reached out and helped me because, in all honesty, I cost too much money to kick to the curbside. I was born and raised in Jonesboro, Tennessee, my hometown, real East Tennessee. You can go an hour and a half east of Knoxville, you're still in Tennessee, guys. And that's where I'm from. And so I was born and raised there. I got fortunate enough to be good in school and got to go to college. Nobody in my family ever been to college, and I got to go to medical school at East Tennessee State. The best 4 years of my life were spent there in medical school. And I never envisioned the course that my life was going to take. I had everything I ever wanted. I lived in a neighborhood where when I was a kid, my parents used to drive us through that neighborhood to see rich people's lights at Christmas time. Now I lived in that neighborhood, and I was addicted to opioids, and I thought I was going to die, and I didn't think there was anybody who could help me. And I was a practicing doc on faculty at the medical school at ETSU, really living my dream, driving cars that as a kid I never would have dreamed that I would have had the opportunity to drive. But this is a route I want to go right now because I want you to understand the power of what we're talking about today. So Judge Sloane and I have run the state big time. I think we've been in about every county. If we hadn't, we've been close, and really even run the nation. And before we did a talk a few years ago, he didn't tell me this, but he played a video clip of the pharmacy shooting that Miss Clift was in. And he didn't know this part of my story. In 2003, I was taking about 500 milligrams of opioids a day. That's 100 Vicodin pills, if you want to put it in terms that you can understand. And I wasn't living underneath a bridge. I was treating people in the ICU, teaching in medical school, going about my life. Nobody knew. And the big problem for me back then was going on vacation. So you're gonna be on vacation. We go to Orange Beach, Alabama. That's where we went for years with a big crew, about 20 of us, all our kids little and playing. Well, I need 700 pills, or I can't get through the week, or I'm gonna get dope sick. And I get my hands on 700 pills, and we take off to the beach. And like any good person with addiction, I've got 700, so I didn't really parcel them out to 100 a day. I took as many as I could, and I'm not going to take any more tomorrow because you don't anticipate tomorrow getting here. That gives you ideas into insight and judgment, and I ran out on Thursday. And so I know I'm getting ready to get dope sick, so I drive around Orange Beach looking for a pill mill, figure I can find one. I know what they look like. I couldn't find a single one, and I came back, and as right before I was getting back to our condo, there's a pharmacy on the corner, a Rite Aid pharmacy. And I was sitting there in my car, dope sick, shaking, thinking, okay, I can't write myself a prescription, they'll catch me. I'm an East Tennessee boy, guys, I'm sorry. I got guns, I got a bunch of them. I ain't never shot any of them, but I got a bunch of them. And I had one in the car that day, and I laid it in my lap, and I considered robbing that pharmacy. I'm a licensed physician. I'm a professor of medicine at my medical school. I've got kids. I've got a life I never dreamed of, and I considered strong-arm robbing a pharmacy. And when I saw that video, I couldn't breathe because I knew that could have been me. So I'm here to advocate for the other side of this, is that given the opportunity, people do recover. They do go on to lives they can't imagine. And if you don't know anybody else, you know me. I'm living proof. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen Lloyd. We will now take questions from the audience. We'll do this for 13 minutes. Please signify, let Ms. Carpenter see that you're interested in asking a question. She'll bring you the microphone. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was writing down some notes real quickly. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist. And the problems that I see here on the street, people get out of jail, they're released, they go through recovery court, they go through classes, testing, which costs them, halfway houses, which costs them, trying to find a job, minimum wage, meetings, which cost them, court costs, and a lot of people are dealing with co-occurring disorders. The quick money is to go back and selling drugs and reuse. And then they're back in jail, which costs. It's a no-win situation for a lot of people on the street. How can this be broken down to where it's a livable situation and it's a realistic situation for people who are going through this every day, in and out of jail, in and out?
Judge Sloane, you deal with this daily.
Those were a lot of questions, but I think it comes down to this by way of an answer. And I know during our lunch hour, we're going to hear from Dr. Harris about the economic impact that this crisis is having on our state. And so in direct response to your question, you're exactly right. When you engage in treatment, treatment costs money and recovery supports cost money, and these people don't have it. And they're not going to be able to obtain and sustain their successful recovery if they don't have the resources. And we can do all that we can to try to help them along, and we do in our courts. I know in my judicial district that we do, but we just add value to the great work everybody else is doing with our leverage and our frequent accountability. But we got to make the investment. We have got to make the investment to help people in their recovery. And I think that Dr. Harris will agree with me, and I hope everybody else in here agrees with me that has any sort of influence on anybody that's a purse string holder, that our return on our investment will be at least $5 for every $1 we invest in trying to help those people obtain recovery and sustain recovery. Thank you.
Would other panelists like to engage in that question?
Yep,
Doctor?
I will, because I echo what Judge says, but I think I think that's why we're here, actually. We talk about this all the time, but I think that's really why we're all in this room is we're looking at a recovery-oriented system of care. We're not going to prescribe somebody a medication and get out of this, and we're not going to stop all the drugs from coming in and an interdiction and stop this. We're looking for a recovery-oriented system of care. As if you look at our overall health, the people in this room, only 5% of it's medicine. Only 5% of it's access to a doctor or a really nice hospital. The remainder of it's something called social determinants of health. Bed to sleep in at night, job to go to, right? And so that's what we're talking about. With a recovery-oriented system of care, there's no wrong door of entry. Right now, it's the Wild West, and I think if we're honest with ourselves, we will admit that. And so I think it's why we're here in the room. Because I love a quote by Paul Batalden. He's this process guy. He says, every process is designed specifically and perfectly to get the result that it gets.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Jen Clift's oldest son that is the addict. I guess I have a statement and question to kind of say. I do have the degree. It's impossible for me to get a job about doing anything, I mean, Walmart to you name it, manager positions at hotels and that kind of deal. It's all been kind of washed away. Dr. Lloyd, I appreciate you sharing with us, and I'm right there with you, my friend. And another thing I wanted to tell, everyone, like the TBI officers in the room, and this is from being a drug dealer to coming and my mom not having a clue about any of this. And, you feel like, okay, is this karma as to what has happened? But for the TBI, when they've taken these opiates off the street in pill form, like he was talking about, the heroin and the cocaine and the methamphetamine, that's all that is available, period, now. And that's going to be the biggest issue that you're going to have to face, and somehow you're going to have to stand up to that. And I don't know how you're going to reach out to that, but that's already, we've already had 3 people in the last week that are our friends that we know have overdosed, and I'm just kind of giving you all a heads up on what is going to happen. And
Would you rephrase the question?
that was more a statement for that one, just for the TBI to give them a heads up, because next year their increases will be outrageous, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
And
Director Rausch?
So I think the challenge is obviously, as was mentioned, as Tommy mentioned earlier, is, we've got to deal with demand, right? Supply is something we've always addressed, and we had to get control of the legal supply, if you will. That was absolutely critical. If you looked at the numbers that they showed on the number of narcotic pills that have been prescribed in Tennessee, I think it was 2006 to 13, over 2.5 billion, right? That's why we're where we are today, right? That's why we've got this crisis. And they built this demand we now have in our communities. And so as we're incrementally trying to deal with that, we take out we start positively impacting the legal supply by getting the bad actors out of the way. And then the illegal supply obviously is going to meet demand. And so that's the other part of the process. It's got to be a combined effort, right? We've got to understand, and I forget who said it, and maybe Monty, but the key here is we've got to be working in all sectors and everybody working together. Prevention, I see Karen here, I worked for a number of years on her board. And prevention is one of the most underfunded issues we have. And, because it's not sexy, it's hard to measure. We've got to deal with it. So prevention And then that intervention effort is another big piece, and that's the treatment and the effort to take care and figure out how to deal with those who are in active addiction and deal with that illness. And then, enforcement always has to be part of the pie. It has to be. We understand that. We prefer the other two take it. Unfortunately, it gets dropped in our lap. And so we're working through it and trying to figure it all out. But we understand where those challenges lie as we dry up that legal side of the house and the illegal steps in. Now, I will tell you, the illegal is not as difficult to deal with as the legal side. The laws are pretty straight there, and we can have an impact. But thank you for
Our topic, again, is suicide and proximate cause with addiction. Other questions? Yes, sir, way in the back. I can. Wait a minute, he's coming to you.
So
There you go.
you have talked about the stigma of the society toward addicted people. I'd like to ask, is there a stigma of addicted people toward the society in seeking for help? So anything that prevent addicted people in seeking for help from the resources out there?
Dr. Lloyd, go.
Oh, well, absolutely. It's called shame. Absolutely. And I know that's a short answer, but shame prevents that. And just, when I initially, when my dad initially confronted me, I knew I had a problem. They said, you need an evaluation. I didn't need an evaluation. I needed help. And so the immediate thing that came to my mind is what the young man was saying. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my medical license, my cars, my houses, all these things that I had at the time. And my dad said, none of that stuff's going to do you any good if you're dead, which I still haven't had a good retort to 15 years later. And so yes, there is a stigma of addicted people because of how society views addiction. Addiction is a moral failure. These people put you over the side. There was a politician up in Ohio who was talking about the overdose death rate and the fact that the county was having a hard time of taking care of those deaths. And he says, well, let's just stop responding and they'll take care of themselves. And you say, well, I hope I never get to that point in my life about anything. But I'll tell you this quick story. It's happened in our profession. I got put on the Chronic Pain Guidelines Committee in our state in 2012, and I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of pain specialists. One of them's in the room, James Chu, who's just outstanding, but another one of our colleagues, not James, he's an anesthesiologist down in Memphis. So it came up, we were talking about the prescribing guidelines, and it says, what are we going to do with the folks who are addicted? Now keep in mind, I'm sitting right beside of this guy. He doesn't know me. I'm from Jonesboro, he's from Memphis. I might as well be from Canada. So he says, I don't worry about the people that are addicted. He said, most of them overdose and die and they take care of themselves. I'm sitting right next to him. And I turned around and I said, I'm glad somebody didn't have that attitude about me. And I let him off the hook about lunchtime because he was, but I kept him out there for a little while just because of that. So there is a stigma the other way around, but it's mainly on how we've seen addiction treated in the past.
In 2017, we had 1,776 drug overdose deaths. Last year, we had more than that. Of those almost 1,800 drug overdose deaths, how many would you attribute, what percentage would you attribute to being as a result of suicide? Mr. Flatt?
Like I said, the most recent one, the report just came out, and I think that's something that Judge Sloane and I have talked about very, very intently over the last couple of months. With the high number of we said, almost up to 30% of the opioid or the overdose deaths that you have in general, up to 30% of those were actually suicide. I mean, people that felt that shame that you were talking about, felt that I cannot overcome this. They already have the addiction that they were probably self-medicating for to help with the other ideas. Now it becomes overbearing, and they don't know, as this young man said, they don't know where to turn to. We have to start providing in mental health services as we're addressing the overall drug issue. We cannot just do it as a medication or supply or demand. We have to talk to those already that are dealing with this. Because suicide, when you talk about 14 to 21,000 of those deaths that were overdoses in 1 year were actually suicides. That's almost half of what the suicides we counted for that were labeled as suicides in our nation in that same year. I have almost half on top of that. So it's something that we have to address in our field, but really, this is something that I came for and I asked to be, what we could put into this is we have to start addressing the mental health issues and helping the people deal with those. You're not going to do away with the drug addiction just by simply doing away with the pills. We have to address the person where they're at, especially with those thoughts of suicides that we're now seeing very prevalent in those people with drug disorders.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you're arguing before a jury, always leave them when they want a little bit more. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you for engaging in this topic of suicidal ideation, proximate cause, and drug addiction. And thank you, audience, very much. We're concluded.